The following program is paid for by the friends and partners of Joyce Meyer Ministries.
Well, welcome to today's program. Today we're going to be discussing parenting, one of the most difficult and yet most important duties that we ever have in life. And many individuals do it alone every day. We're talking specifically today about single parenting, and I know that many of you are not parents, but perhaps today's program will help you reach out to the men and women that may be suffering in silence that you know. Joining me today is licensed family therapist Dr. Linda Mental.
Dr. Linda Mental is a licensed marriage and family therapist with more than 30 years of clinical experience in the psychology of relationships. She's a winner of the Mom's Choice Awards, a nationally recognized speaker, and a college lecturer. Dr. Mental is a best-selling author with more than a dozen books to her credit, including Making Peace with Your Thighs and Letting Go of Worry.
Well, Linda, it's good to have you back again.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you always.
We always have to have our little standing joke about your last name being Mental, and you're dealing with people's, sometimes their mental issues,
Yes.
the things that we go through in our mind. But today we want to talk specifically about single parenting. I know that there's more and more single parents today than probably at any other time, and they do have some unique circumstances that it would just be good to address those issues. What have you experienced in that area in your counseling?
Well, I think it's good that you're talking about this because it actually has doubled. The number has doubled since 1970.
Wow.
And when you think about, if you take a statistic like this, where 50% to 60% of children will at some point be in a single parent home,
Wow.
that's a lot of kids that we're talking about. So what are the issues? The issues in some ways are not that different than what dual parents experience, maybe more magnified, and then there
Right.
are some unique things. So if we start talking about the issues of loneliness,
Right.
which is one of the big things, and 1 in 3 parents who feel lonely also suffer from depression.
Yeah.
So there's a
right.
tie-in with depression, anxiety, the stress, sometimes the overwhelming feeling that I have to make all the decisions,
Right.
I have to have all the responsibility on my shoulders, and of course that relates to financial issues.
Right.
It's tough to be a single parent in today's economy. It's tough to be
Yeah.
anybody in today's economy, much
Right.
less not have maybe the financial
Yeah.
support that you need. And we know from the studies that when people divorce, that women tend to go way down in their economic status.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, and there's a real tie, Joyce, with economy, the economics of a family, and kids doing well.
Yeah.
And that really is an issue. So one of the things we know in general, that sometimes kids from single parent homes don't always do as well with social problems and behavior problems, but there are things, and we're going to get to that, that
Yeah.
really buffer that won't make your child a statistic.
We all have disadvantages in some ways, and one of the keys of being a believer is to learn that God will be to you
That's right.
anything that you need Him to be if you keep the right mindset about it.
And I think that's so true. All of us in life have challenges. We all have something that we have to overcome. And so there are unique challenges to being a
Right.
single parent. But again, it's what you're talking
Yeah.
about. There is so much hope about what you can do, and then partnering with God, which
Yes.
is what really makes the equation go way up for the hope and the promise of these kids doing well in these families.
Absolutely.
And the parent doing well and feeling like
Absolutely.
they have purpose and a hope and a future and
Yeah.
all the things that we know are possible with God in our lives.
There's 3 specific things here that we know that people that are single parents experience: loneliness, depression, and stress. So I think with loneliness, we have to learn how to be alone and yet not feel lonely.
And there's a big difference in those two things, because being alone is not a pathological state.
Right,
It's
no.
something that we all experience, and we all have to be alone at certain times in our lives. And Americans, it just seems like we have a hard time with that. We live in this society that is so distracting.
Yeah.
And, we have to always be doing something, and we really don't know how to sit and be quiet.
Right.
And then you add that, be quiet before the Lord,
Yeah.
and actually listen and get fed and filled up. We're not really good at doing that. So being alone is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
We just have to learn how to do it well.
And it's very, probably a lot of the people do find themselves in this situation of single parenting. It wasn't something they chose.
Right, right.
It was something it was a change that came into their life without their permission.
Right.
And so we have to not only adjust circumstantially, but we have to adjust mentally when things change that we have no control over.
And especially, you know, you think about the number of people that are in those relationships, those divorce relationships, where maybe they were divorced because they had somebody who was abusive, and then continues after you know, the relationship is over, but they still have contact with your children.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the key areas where single parents really need the support and the help, because dealing with an ex-spouse who you couldn't get along with very well when you were married, and then if they continue to be involved in substance abuse or domestic violence, or they're doing things that are very, you know, sketchy or dangerous to the child, maybe involved in fraud or some kind of other thing, you still have to be the one who's dealing with that person.
Right.
And you have to constantly be checking your anger and your areas of frustration and overwhelming, and all of that just is ongoing. It's not like with a death. That person is still there, they're still doing things, they're still irritating you, and
you're
having
concerned
to deal with
about
that.
the influence that they're having on
your
the child
yeah.
on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know I've talked to numerous people that have been like, well, you know, when my child's with me, I take them to church and I try to teach them godly principles, but then I feel like when they're with the other parent that they undo everything that I've done. And I know it is confusing for the child, and it can be a great concern for the parent. But I do want to just give a little word of encouragement to simply say that I do believe that in the end, good always wins out over evil.
And children are really good at discerning when they know that the parent is coming from some value system. I had this crazy situation one time I was counseling, and the mother, it was the mother in this case, the child was living with the father, but the mother would chide her teenage daughter every time she would come to her house for not having sex with her boyfriend. And was encouraging the boyfriend to do things, was encouraging her daughter to do things, and the father was beside himself, and the father was sitting there trying to talk about, you know, what he believed biblically, what was the basis of, you don't have premarital sex, this is what God says, you have to honor your body, all these things. And the mother was sleeping with all these men and doing all this stuff. It was probably, you know, the guilt that she was having over what she was doing, but she was just going, and the father said, I don't know what to do, I can't control her. And I kept saying, your daughter is not stupid. Your daughter is hearing you, she's watching your life, she sees the example.
That's exactly right.
But now it is tough when they're teenagers, because everything in you when you're a teenager wants to rebel and wants to go another way. And when you have a parent giving you permission that way, it's sometimes hard to hold on to that. But I kept saying, just hold on, just keep talking to her, just keep telling her what you believe, showing her the example. And in the end, that girl did not choose to act the way her mom did.
And also letting that child see the good fruit of your right choice.
Yes.
I think if we just say, you know, just watch the results, you know.
That's right. And she was living with him, and that person, and this is a really important point when we're talking about single parenting, because all the research shows that it's the parent who the child resides with that has the biggest influence. Obviously, we would think that, but that person, when you're dealing with someone else that you don't have the control over, the ex or the person out there who's maybe the father or the mother, you just have to keep saying to yourself, remembering that they're watching me, they're hearing me, they're with me every day, and I've got God partnering with me, so this can be a much more powerful influence.
And to lean on that scripture that says, when you train up a child in the way they should go, when they're old, they won't depart from it. Not that you might not have to go through some difficult times, but I just want to stress again that I do believe that good always wins out over evil in the end. Well, when we return, we're going to discuss a situation not often thought about as a problem area for single parents. Stay with us. Well, single parenting can be very difficult, but it can be done with God's help. Here's a look at a success story.
It's an enormous responsibility to raise a child, and then when you're raising a child by yourself. So I learned early on how to pray about everything. Pray for everything, because you're making major decisions that are going to impact somebody else's life for the rest of their life. She is just so passionate. She is just kind and gentle and warm and loving and really friendly. She's really outgoing, and I love that about her. She makes people feel good about themselves. She's positive, she's an encourager, and to meet her is to know that about her. It's scary, you know, because she's in college, and so it's scary, you know, because she's not under my protective care anymore, everything that you've put into place, from newborn on is now being into practice. If you watch the news, it's just, wow. And then you realize my baby's out there. But God is so faithful, and I have seen that throughout her whole life. And I really see it now when I need him the most with her, when she's not with me.
Well, Monica's with us today in the audience, and she has a question. Monica, it's good to see you over there, smiling, happy.
Yes.
What is your question?
Well, now that my daughter is an adult and she's gone more than she's at home, I'd like to know how to handle having an empty nest.
Okay, well, all parents ask that. I was asked that recently by several people. And the first thing that I would like to say is that I think the mindset that you get toward that is going to make a big difference in how you handle it as it progresses. I really think a lot of times we set ourselves up for failure by thinking, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? This has been my whole life, now what? So I would encourage you to just think, this is a natural change. It happens to everybody. And this is going to be a good time in my life. It's going to be a different time in my life, but it's going to be a good time. And even look at it like a new beginning for you. Linda, would you like to?
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said. I also think I'm right there with you, Monica. And in fact, right before I came on the show, my college daughter called me and asked me a question. And I think one of the biggest surprises for me was how quiet the house was. I was used to all this activity, teenagers running in and out at all hours of the night, no one going to bed before 1 o'clock in the morning. And suddenly at 10 o'clock, my husband and I are looking at each other going, okay. It's quiet, and you would be by yourself during that time, which can be a great time, as Joyce was saying. It's just the adjustment.
Right.
You're grieving a little bit of a loss and a shift, like you were saying, Joyce, and adjusting to that where you, instead of saying, what did I lose, you're beginning to say, what have I gained?
Exactly.
I can actually read a book at night now, and I can actually, talk with my friends about novels or some kind of book that I've read, one of Joyce's books.
Yeah.
So there's time now to do things for yourself that you never really had. And the reason that a lot of women get stuck, or a lot of men who are single parents get stuck, is because they've put their whole identity into being a mom. And they haven't worked on parts of themselves.
Right.
And this is a great time to work on parts of yourself.
Right.
And to start saying, okay, not that a mom isn't one of the most wonderful things to be in life. I'm a mom,
exactly.
It's great. But we are more than moms.
Yes, exactly.
So we need to work on those parts of ourselves. And sometimes this empty nest place, when they're gone, is a great time to do that.
When your relationship with your children changes from a child relationship to an adult relationship, you have to learn how to care for them and how to give them advice, but only when they want it, and how to stop kind of just trying to tell them, what to do all the time. I mean, although I think a mother's always going to don't eat that, don't do that. Some of the things I tell my grown kids, just get over it. I'm always going to do that. But you do have to learn how to let them be adults, and even how to let them maybe make some of their own mistakes.
Yeah, and that's always hard to watch. It's like when your child starts to drive. The first time they're out on the road by yourself, you're like, you're just gritting your teeth and thinking, will they ever come back alive? I think it's the same thing. It's that process of what you're talking about, letting go, moving from that complete dependence into that more interdependence. And what we teach all the time in psychology and relationships is that kids are always pulling away. They're learning to become their separate own person, but they're doing that through attachment.
Yeah.
And isn't that great? Because that's such a metaphor for God. God is saying to us that we are still connected to Him. He's our Father. He's God our Father, but He's allowing us to be who He designed us to be, our individual, unique self. And He wants us to develop who that is. And He lets us sometimes fall in our terms of our own development until we learn. So it's that same process that we experience with God we're doing with our kids.
Well, I think that, I just really want to encourage you and all of our viewers too, to, like Linda said, take it as what you're going to gain, not what you're going to lose. And most children will need a period of time of really pulling away more than what you might like them to, but they will come back. I spend a lot of time with my grown children now, and my oldest daughter, when she got married and left home, didn't even call me for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I would cry and tell Dave, she doesn't love me anymore. And, you know, she was just like, needed a little space, you know, wanted to develop her own identity, and she didn't want somebody telling her to clean her room, and, you know, so she just kind of went and had her little mobile home and had her mess and did whatever she wanted to. And, you know, now we are just absolutely the best of friends. So just try to keep in mind that sometimes it's not just a transition for you, but it's also a transition for them.
That's good.
And that they will come back full circle, especially if you can handle the transition right.
Yeah.
If you can be happy for them and not be constantly trying to be what you always were. So when we return, we're going to discuss options that can help single parents overcome their challenges and answer some audience questions. Well, welcome back to the program. Dr. Linda Mental and I are discussing the challenges of single parenting. And today we have several single parents in our audience, and soon we'll be taking questions from some of them, and I think you're going to enjoy that. But right now, Linda, there's a few things that you and I want to discuss. Single parents, should they stay engaged in like a regular life, or do they need to just now totally be nothing but a single parent?
Well, if they are, they'll probably be depressed, like we talked about earlier, if they're doing that. No, you have to obviously figure out a way to still do the things that you need to do in life. And
be a person.
Yeah, be a person and be more than just a parent. Again, when I say that, I'm not denigrating parenting at all, but you are a whole person with, you know, probably a church life and maybe a school life with children and friends and family members, and you need to stay connected and engaged with all of those people.
Well, Steve from our studio audience has a question for us, and I think we're all going to learn something from it. Steve?
Yes, Joyce. Being a single parent often magnifies the challenges that we already face as an adult. Do you have any tips or thoughts on balancing our work, private, and family lives in lieu of these challenges?
Well, you know, I'm asked that question all the time, all the time. And I really believe the best answer to that is you always have to be straightening your priorities out. I think it's not just something we do one time and then it stays straight forever. I think that we really you have to listen to your children. I mean, when you hear them saying, well, I feel like I never see you, or I feel like you never really have time to listen to me, or you're never able to go to my ball games, or you're never, you know, those are clues to us that there's something that's out of balance here that maybe we need to pay attention to. Linda?
You have hit it on the nail, because emotional support is what kids from single-parent families say that they really need from their parents. They need exactly what you said. They need their parents paying attention. And I think time management, which is a little bit of what you're talking about too, you have less time, let's face it. I mean, you can't say there's not a spouse there where you can say, take the child, he's making me crazy, let me go do something else, get something done. So you really do have less time. So you have to be better time managers than most people. And I also believe that you have to have different expectations. You know, we just can't do it all.
Right,
I would love to be the perfect housemaker or the perfect cook, you know, and when you're a single parent, you know, if that house is not as clean as it needs to be.
That's where that trusting God to make up the difference really comes in, because if you try to be everything that this child needs, and you're personally trying to make up for what they've lost, then you're just going to end up miserable yourself and being ineffective in what you're trying to do. And I would like to just add to the very top of your list of priorities, you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's not a selfish thing. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of anyone else. Whether that means having a little fun, getting the right rest, taking time to go to the gym and work out, eating properly, sleeping properly. Honestly and truly, I think that we get out of balance with thinking that we should sacrifice everything for somebody else. There are sacrifices, definitely. But if you don't take care of yourself, you really are going to end up mentally, emotionally burned out, and then the decisions that you make about your child are going to be very bad decisions. So make sure that you don't just leave yourself out of your list of priorities.
Yeah, that's really good. And you're modeling for your child too, but based on what you're saying, you're modeling that self-care is not important if you don't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's
so
true.
you're just passing it on.
Well, we have another question from the audience from Kristen.
When I was a single mom, I actually lived with my parents, and then whenever I got married, I noticed that my son had a very deep connection with them, and sometimes I find myself getting jealous. Is there a way that I can overcome this?
Well, first of all, I think it's, I want to compliment you on your honesty. A lot of times people wouldn't even want to bring something like that out, but I'm sure it is something that people do experience. So, Linda, you're the doctor here. What do you have to say?
Well, I love the question. That was so good because it is true. A lot of people wouldn't admit that. But one of the benefits that single kids have over kids raised in dual families is that, dual parents, is that they have deeper connections with their extended families often. So you actually, there are some benefits actually that you wouldn't think about. The other one is resilience. There are a lot more kids that are resilient from coming from single parenting families because of the way single parents are when they're doing things in the positive. But so your child actually has a deep connection. That's something that most parents want with their kids. So I think for you, you have to just kind of reverse it and think, hey, my child's gotten a benefit that maybe he wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't been in that situation, and just rethink it and then deal with your jealousy, maybe what else is going on there. And it's probably guilt, like you said, that you want to be everything to your child and your parents have picked up some of the slack and they've taken the care and they've actually helped you. Instead of feeling guilty about that, say, that's great that I have supportive parents who are willing to help me.
That's true. There's so many things really that are benefits to us that we pervert their value in our own mind by not putting a positive spin on it. And there's a lot of people who would love for their children to be closer to their grandparents, and maybe they just haven't been, or they don't live in the same area where they can be. And I think even a lot of children, you know, grow up and they wish they were closer to their grandparents. So you really do have a benefit there that if you claim that benefit, then it probably will break the power of that jealousy that you're feeling. Well, we have one final question, and it comes from Angela.
Hi, Joyce. Can you speak to the constant pressure of making decisions by yourself as a single parent? You know, every day there's decisions that have to be made, you know, and it's constant. It's the constant pressure. It can be as small as just what's going to be for dinner tonight, or it can be something larger, you know, regarding the health of a child or the school that they're going to attend. But it's that constant pressure.
Yeah. Well, hoping that I don't sound overly spiritual when I answer your question, you're really not making decisions by yourself. None of us are. You know, if we really believe that we're following the leadership of the Holy Spirit, here again, this is something that God can give you the confidence to believe that He's involved in every decision that you make. Learn to follow your heart, follow what you're sensing in your heart, and believe that you're up to the task in front of you. The enemy gives us ways to make us think that we can't handle things, that really God never allows more to come on you than what you can bear, but with every temptation, He also provides the way out. That's my spiritual answer. We'll see what Dr. Linda has to say.
Well, I definitely agree with the spiritual answer, but I also think you have to be afraid not to make mistakes.
Right.
And parenting is about making mistakes, and you talk a lot about being kind to yourself, and I think you have to be kind to yourself when you make a mistake.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's even a matter of your birth order. I'm a youngest in my family, so everybody told me what to do, and I just did it. And so when I had to make decisions as a young adult, I was like, well, where's that oldest brother who's going to make that decision for me? You know, there's no one. And the other thing on the other side of that is there's no one to blame when the decision goes wrong, when you make them all yourself.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just you getting comfortable with decision making. Maybe like me, maybe your birth order, maybe you just weren't used to doing that, or you didn't have to make decisions growing up. And I know it's hard when you have to do that. I remember somebody was telling me once that I hated picking up the phone when solicitors would call. I would just be terrified of that. I would get like panic attacks almost. And finally, one of my friends just handed me the phone and said, talk to him. And I was like, you know, and I did it, and I was like, wow, I can do this, you know? So now they call and I'm just like, hey. No guilt, no panic, no nothing. So it's practicing, it's doing it, and again, the mindset, like you were saying, if you're thinking, why do I always have to make all the decisions? And you're not thinking, okay, I'm getting good at decision making, and you're partnering with God. I think the other side of that is also getting friends, getting wise counsel around you. That's also scriptural, to have people that you can count on that know you, love you, trust you, have your best interest, and will give you good counsel as well. So you're not always having to make those decisions maybe alone.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, self-doubt is terrible. You know, we have to have confidence that we're able to make those decisions. Now, see, somebody like me with a stronger personality, I would probably think, oh, great, I get to be in charge of everything.
I should live with you then. That can be, you can tell me what to do and I'll just do it.
I just love telling everybody what to do. So, you see, but I think really just putting a little more positive spin on it. You know, God will give you the ability to do what you need to do. And if you trust your decision-making ability, it's going to be easier to do it. And like Dr. Linda said, don't worry about it when you make a mistake. We're not always going to make perfect decisions all the time.
The proceeding was paid for by the friends and partners of Joyce Meyer Ministries.